The only sound between us was the clinking of silverware on porcelain as the candlelight flickered, throwing long shadows on the dining table. It should have been just another quiet evening in our house, another meal between a husband and wife. But the tension in the air was heavy. Isabel sat across from me, her gaze far away, her stance rigid. For months, she had been distant. She hardly touched the food I had made, and every few minutes she glanced at her phone, as if waiting for something. Or someone. I had ignored these signs for years, convincing myself it was just stress, just a phase. But deep down, I knew the truth. Love doesn't just fade like this, not without a reason. I finally spoke. "You're not eating." She blinked, snapping out of whatever thought had captured her. "I'm not that hungry," she murmured. I nodded, staring at my plate. My appetite had vanished. For months, I had rehearsed this conversation in my head, picturing different outcomes, some civil, others explosive. But nothing could have prepared me for what she said next. "Can I be honest with you, Marcus?" I looked up. Her smirk was cold, calculated. I braced myself. The words that followed hit me like a physical blow. My hands tightened around the table's edge, my knuckles turning white. "Marcus," she said, exhaling as if she'd been holding this in for years. "My ex was better in every way, particularly in bed. I settled for you." I blinked, trying to process. It wasn't just the words. It was the ease with which she said them. As if she had been waiting for the perfect moment to inflict the most pain. I should have flipped the table, yelled, done something. But all I felt was an eerie silence. I leaned back and exhaled slowly. "It's funny you say that," I said, calmly. "I've already served you with divorce papers." Isabel froze, her wine glass hovering mid-air. The air in the room shifted. "You're lying," she whispered. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and slid it across the table. The email confirmation from my lawyer was on the screen, her face drained of color. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For years, I had been the understanding husband, the one who smoothed over tense moments. I had swallowed every disdainful sigh, every icy look, every passive-aggressive remark. Not this time. She set her glass down with a sharp clink. Her fingers clenched around the stem before she let go entirely. "You're overreacting," she said, her voice clipped but controlled. "This is over one stupid comment? One careless thing I said?" I shook my head. "No, Isabel, that wasn't just a comment. That was the truth you've been waiting to say for a long time." She sneered, pushing her plate away. "You act like I've been the worst wife ever, like I haven't tolerated you all these years." "Tolerated me?" I chuckled bitterly. "Is that what marriage was to you?" She leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "You think you're some saint? The perfect husband? You're so focused on your work that—" I raised a hand, cutting her off. "Isabel, listen to yourself." She crossed her arms, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. "I didn't mean it like that," I smirked. "That's exactly what you meant. You were waiting for the right moment to cut me deep enough that I wouldn't recover." For a moment, regret flickered across her face, but it disappeared just as quickly. She straightened, regaining her composure. "You're making a mistake, Marcus." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch. Then I stood up. "No, Isabel. The mistake was staying this long." Her nostrils flared. "You think you can just walk away and everything will magically be better?" I shrugged, grabbing my jacket. She reached for my phone. "Do you really think you can handle the house, the finances, everything alone?" "My lawyer is handling everything," I interrupted. "You'll get the documents tomorrow, sign them, or don't. It won't change anything." She gripped the table's edge as if grounding herself. Then she exhaled sharply. "You really think you can survive without me?" she whispered. I smirked. "Isabel, I haven't lived for years, but I'm about to." I turned toward the door. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice low and cutting. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. "The only thing I regret," I said, looking back at her one last time, "is not doing this sooner." And then I walked away. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the house and our past in silence. Outside, the night air was cold, but it felt cleansing. Like I had just shed a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying, but I wasn't naive. This wasn't the end. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room. The hum of the air conditioner, the firm mattress, the impersonal decor, it was the most peace I had felt in years. I checked my phone. 7 missed calls, 2 voicemails, a handful of texts I didn't bother opening. By the time I got to work, I already knew what they said. The argument had begun. My phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Isabel. It was my lawyer. The divorce papers had been served. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the message. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was over, or at least that's what I thought. Because when I got home that night to pack my things, Isabel was waiting. The front door flew open before I even stepped out of my car. She stood there, arms crossed, her eyes burning with a mix of desperation and fury. "You think you can just leave me?" she spat. I shut the car door, my face unreadable. "I don't think," I said. "I know." Her lips curled. "You really believe you can live without me?" I exhaled slowly, gripping my keys tighter. "I already am." Her jaw clenched. "You're making a mistake." I chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "I made a mistake 10 years ago, when I married you." Her face twisted, and then, without warning, she slapped me. The sting spread across my cheek for a moment. She looked as shocked as I felt. I inhaled deeply, my jaw tightening. Then I muttered, "You just made this a lot easier." I walked past her, into the house, and started packing. As I moved through the rooms, stuffing my belongings into a single suitcase, I realized something. This house was never a home. When I was done, she was still in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, her back to me. I stopped at the doorway. "Sign the papers, Isabel. It'll be easier for both of us." She didn't turn around. I nodded to myself, grabbed my suitcase, and walked out the door. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I didn't stop. For the first time in years, I realized the truth. The only thing I regretted was staying so long. To witness the death of something that had long since passed away, with no sorrow or hope. As I drove across the city, the only sound coming from the car was the gentle hum of the engine. My jaw was clenched on the steering wheel, but it wasn't rage anymore. It was finality. I was driving away from her, not from my house. The receptionist hardly looked up when I checked into the hotel again, the same one I had been sleeping at since I left. As though she had already classified me as another male fleeing something, another husband going through the signs of a failing marriage. Perhaps I was, and perhaps that's precisely what I had been, but not anymore. I fell to the floor as soon as I entered my room. My phone vibrated in my pocket as I gently exhaled in bed. I knew before I even looked that it would be Isabel. When her name appeared on the screen, I pondered whether or not to respond. Pressing decline resulted in a more fulfilling stillness than I had anticipated. It marked the breaking point. The messages began shortly after. Initially, they were calculated and measured, the type of text that made it seem like she was the more sensible one. "Marcus, I get that you're furious, but can we have an adult conversation about this?" I let them stay there, unopened and unanswered. "I believe you're making an emotional decision, and you need some time to calm down." Then the tone changed. "You're acting like ignoring me will make everything better." Childish. But I didn't answer. When she saw that I wasn't complying, I nearly burst out laughing at her next message. "I don't even care anymore. I had endured years of emotional manipulation and sleepless nights. Through arguments where I had to apologize to keep the peace. I was treated like an afterthought, but to her, I was weak for leaving. I didn't fall for it this time. I put my phone down, sprawled out on the bed, and closed my eyes. Nevertheless, I woke up the following morning feeling lighter than I had in years. Breakfast was stress-free. No icy looks from the other side of the table, no doubt about what I said or did. I was alone, and I was content with that. As I sorted through my work-related emails, a subject line caught my eye. I clicked on it and scanned the contents. Confirmed divorce papers. Isabel had been served by my lawyer. I reclined in my chair, slowly releasing my breath. This wasn't just another fight. By the afternoon, Isabel had come to the conclusion that this was just another argument. When my phone rang for the 6th time in a row, I finally answered after ignoring the first few calls. Before she spoke, there was a brief silence on the other end. "You actually did it," she said. Then, almost to herself, "You actually filed for divorce." Her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. I didn't reply. I heard her take a short breath, but I remained silent. "Marcus, we can resolve this. Sure, we've fought in the past, but this isn't a fight, Isabel," I interrupted. She let out a trembling breath. "This is the end." "You don't mean that." "I did. I waited for you to love me the way I deserved, and for the first time in our marriage, I truly meant it." Her breath caught. "That's unfair." I nearly laughed. Was it unfair that I had gone to such lengths for years just to be enough for her? To be compared to a ghost from her past? Was it unfair that she had humiliated me, insulted me, and then assumed I would stay? I shook my head. "I'm done." Isabel signed the documents, Marcus. I hung up and blocked her number this time. That night I went for a stroll, and for the first time in years, I felt free. The city came to life around me, people going about their daily routines, and I realized I was among them. I wasn't wasting my days caught in a toxic cycle. I wasn't waiting for someone to eventually notice and appreciate me. I had chosen myself, and that was more important than anything else. Isabel would never understand. Love, for her, had always been a game of power. But for me, it was finally something real, something worth waiting for. The next morning, I read my lawyer's email. Isabel had been served legally. There was no more speculation about her reaction, no more wondering if she thought I was bluffing. It was finished. The weight of finality pressed against my chest as I sat on the edge of my hotel bed. But instead of regret, I felt relief. I had spent years carrying the burden of trying to make our marriage work, giving everything I had to something that had long since rotted from the inside out. I had nothing left to give, and that realization didn't frighten me. It freed me. But I knew Isabel. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. She wouldn't simply sign the papers in silence, and I was right. By midday, my phone rang again, and again her name flashing across the screen. I let it ring a few times before answering the 5th call. "You got the papers?" I said in a calm, indifferent tone. There was a brief pause before she spoke, her tone carefully controlled. "You simply filed for divorce without even talking to me first?" I nearly chuckled at the absurdity of it. After all that she had said to me over the years, she was now trying to play the victim? "I gave you years, Isabel. We had plenty of time to talk. You made your thoughts about me very clear. I'm just making it official." She exhaled sharply, clearly annoyed. "You're being dramatic. Couples argue. That doesn't mean you throw everything away over one bad night." I leaned back in my chair, shaking my head. "This isn't about one night. It's about every single moment before it." "I was upset, Marcus. I was trying to get a reaction out of you." "And you did," I said plainly. "Just not the one you wanted." She remained silent for a while before attempting to soften her tone. This doesn't have to be this. Wei, our life together hasn't been perfect, but isn't it worth fighting for? I closed my eyes, waiting for doubt to creep in, as it always did. But it never came. I had spent years fighting for this marriage, and I was exhausted. It's not, I finally said. She took a sharp breath, unprepared for that answer. For years, she had relied on my constant attempts to fix things, but she had pushed too far. Her voice hardened again. You think things will be better? That you'll find someone else? I smirked. I don't need someone else. I just need someone who actually wants me. Silence. I knew I was right. And so did she. She exhaled sharply. Fine, let's make this easy. For a moment, I believed she might let go. But then she spoke again. I'll see you in court, Marcus. The call ended. I stared at my phone for a long time before putting it down. She wanted to fight, to make me suffer, for having the audacity to leave her. But she didn't realize. The hardest part was already over. I had already left. The rest was just paperwork.